Hello, and welcome to our webinar today. We're so excited to be introducing this concept of how to build community around your events. I've got a great guest speaker with me here today, and we've got a lot of content to get through. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Today, we're here to discuss the significance of community in modern events, really bridging the gap between engagement and brand loyalty. And we know the rising importance of community-centric events is only starting to enter our minds. And as all of you are planning for next year, we hope that some of the concepts today will influence your plans. Now let's get to our speakers here today. I'd like to first introduce myself. I'm Stacy Shepard. I'm a member of Cvent's marketing team here, and I lead our solutions marketing team focused on industry-specific solutions and the ways that our customers are using the platform. I'd also like to introduce my co-speaker here today, Katie Ray. I'll pass it to you, Katie.
Thank you so much, Stacy, for having me be a part of this with y'all. Like she said, my name is Katie Ray, and I'm the head of community over at Metadata.
All right, let's jump into today's topic. I can't wait for y'all to hear more from Katie. As she mentioned, she is the head of community. She's really the expert here to discuss building community within your events. But before we jump into events and the channel and how community is starting to emerge as a key topic, I think it's worth it to just take a step back and think about how the state of marketing has changed. I love this quote that I grabbed from a recent HubSpot State of Marketing report that 80% have said that marketing has changed more in the last 3 years than in the last 50, which means us as marketers are navigating a new frontier. Things are more digital, consumers are much more aware, they have more resources, we have new audiences coming up, hello Gen Z, and there's more competition than ever. So crafting a successful event requires a really keen understanding of the purpose, the goals, and the objectives. And while business objectives like lead generation, thought leadership continue to be vital, the core essence of any event should be centered around your community. So how do we ensure that our event design truly speaks to that community, their needs, their desires, and their changing expectations? The key here lies in a systematic approach where we continuously question motives, strategies, and execution. And today we're going to go through some of those best practices and even some helpful checklists so that you can jot down some of these notes and apply them to your own event programs. But we're really going to think through the event design process and how we can continue to maintain that community-focused approach. Remember, an event is not just a one-off occasion. It's an opportunity to really nurture, engage, and grow your community. And that's what we're here to discuss today. So what is brand loyalty? When we think about community, that community oftentimes ties directly back to our brand. I reached out to the American Marketing Association, and they define brand loyalty as a situation in which a consumer generally buys the same manufacturer, product, or service repeatedly rather than buying from multiple suppliers in the same category. But I think it goes beyond that. And so when I think about my definition of brand loyalty, it's much more that emotional connection that customers have to your brand, which actually motivates them to choose your brand over its competitors. That feeling of trust, satisfaction, and just affinity that customers have makes them want to do business with you repeatedly. And now that we understand that importance, why should we prioritize brand loyalty? And I'm going to pass this to Katie to talk about our challenge as marketers and how we're shifting more from audience to community.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think whenever you're discussing brand loyalty, a lot of it is really under the compass of audience building, right? You're wanting to get in front of as many people as possible. You're wanting to get them excited about what you have to say about any type of event that you may have going on, any type of recent campaigns or content. And so a lot of audience and brand loyalty building lies within providing resources and information for them to digest. But that's about it. That's really where things end. And so community comes in to really make this very much a cyclical experience, right? So instead of just the reading and absorbing information, it's now how do we entertain these conversations? How do we become a truly active participant in what these discussions look like? It's like listed on the screen. It's not just this one way of, oh, I'm reading this. It's a two-way. I'm reading this and we're discussing, right? And through all of that, you're building relationships. And whenever you look at community, you have to look at it under the guise of relationship building, because that's what it is. It's not just I'm building a network, you're building relationships. And with that will come better brand loyalty. It'll be long term loyalty because they're not just falling in love with the brand, they're falling in love with the people behind the brand because of the conversations and relationships. Similarly, you're going to have much higher engagement from community building versus brand loyalty and audience building. Once again, if they're just there reading it and there's no call to action to get them to take it a step further, you're missing out on all of that type of engagement that you could be having, and also missing out on the feedback loop that you will be creating with community too. And so it's a very, very big difference. And we see this so easily on LinkedIn and other social media platforms where people are sharing ideas and everyone's responding and saying, this is great. But if you look into communities, you see similar ideas being shared, but the conversation is almost tenfold. And I think that's what we're really going to hone in on to today as well.
So I think taking that one step further, it's great to think about audience to community. It sounds very simple. Katie makes all of that sound very easy. But I think part of that too is really shifting our mindset. And when it comes to shifting your mindset from audience to community, especially as marketers where we're so audience driven and always thinking about ways to engage new audiences, I went ahead and pulled together 4 ways that you can shift your mindset, which I've outlined here. But I'm also curious to hear from those that are joining us here today. How have you shifted your mindset? Is there anything that you've done that's really helped you transition your mindset from audience generation to community generation? And Katie and I are going to dive deep into these now. The
Absolutely.
first, oh, go ahead, Katie.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just saying, absolutely, especially whenever you're looking at some of these points too. If you look at the commonalities between all of them, it takes it a step further from that quick proactive to a new level of reactiveness as well. And if you look, especially at the first point, you're emphasizing engagement over broadcast and you're focusing on building relationships, not just the transactional side of it, and long term versus short term loyalty and feedback, but then also implementing the feedback. There's a 1 and a 2 for every single one of these. And I think what people really misunderstand with community building, especially, is one, it takes a lot of time. And if you look at all of these items on this list, it's all things that take time. So if you're really interested in community building and leveraging your events and community within your events for more success, you have to be prepared to take time, because these are all true relationships that are coming through it and actual items that just take time to happen versus lead generation, like you mentioned earlier. You could put an ad campaign on LinkedIn and collect thousands of names, but there's no relationship. There's no loyalty being built through that. It's what you do with it instead.
Yeah. And I think that focus on building relationships really just brings that human element to our ways of doing business today. I know that our customers really appreciate getting to know the people behind the product and behind the service and really connecting with our team in a lot of different ways, whether that be through Zoom calls or through face-to-face interactions or even in person at, some of our own events that we're hosting. Really exposing and creating those relationships on a more human level really help to not only build trust, but create community, not only among our audience, but also among our team as well, that we're just going to continue to learn from and be able to improve our products and services to better support our customers as well. So when it comes to thinking about community and how this ties back to your events, I think it's important to talk about the value of events for your community, right? And 25%, we've actually seen a 25% increase in brand loyalty for companies that prioritize events. And I think that's a fantastic stat because the value of events for your brand cannot be separated. Your brand, your events, they're a reflection of each other. And it's amazing to see more and more companies start to prioritize events to really drive that brand reputation and loyalty from their customers. And then the second stat that I've grabbed here is that 74% of event attendees say they have a more positive opinion about the company, the brand, product, or service being promoted after the event. That means that touch point of attending, either they're learning, they're networking, they're growing, they're making relationships. They leave that interaction feeling more positive about your brand because of the way that you've treated them or they've experienced your products or services during that event, which is fantastic. And then the third stat here that really demonstrates that value is that 62% of marketers agree that events will become more important in their marketing mix as time goes on. That means that more of us are thinking, what is our event strategy for next year? Are we going to double down on one type of event? Are we going to start a new type of event? How can we create more and better events to continue to engage our community? I also wanted to highlight some of the non quantifiable ways that events tie back to our community. Events today don't look like they did in 2019. And I think that's a great thing. Events today are more inclusive, they're more accessible, and with digital components, you've never been able to reach as many audiences and contacts as you can today. This means that events are more active. Events are now a two-way conversation. We're hearing more from our attendees, they're hearing more from you, and we're able to engage more together. And these events truly build relationships. It's not without noting that these qualitative factors within your events are more important than ever. Katie, any thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. The first point is actually something that we hinge almost all of our community in-person events on is whenever you're thinking about bringing a group of people together, you have to remember the type of people that will be represented. Not everyone wants to just sit around a bar and talk with each other, right? You have a lot of introverts that want to be a part of something, but it makes them uncomfortable. They don't want to go and network. So for us, every single one of our in-person events, we have some type of an activity. And I love that so much because we have a lot of people who have actually come up to me and said, I wouldn't have come if this was just a normal networking happy hour. But we're playing mini putt-putt golf, we're playing ping pong, we're doing different things, and that gives them an opportunity to actually participate but stay in their comfort zone at the same time, and they're getting more out of it. So for me, that absolutely hits home for how we build our community event strategy. Same thing, it is a two-way conversation. So even though we're making sure everybody that attends is incredibly included, there's different opportunities for people to communicate with each other through those events as well. So I agree. And honestly, I think the hardest part about really quantifying and qualifying the success of an event is actually tied to stuff like this where you can't really track, right? Like you can get NPS scores after, and that's great. But also, those are so subjective. So it's really tough to actually say, like, hey, Mr. Miss CEO, this is worth the money. And so there's other ways we can track it, and we'll dive into that a little bit later too.
Awesome. Yeah, now that we've covered the why, let's talk a little bit about how. So, how we can actually make our events a community building channel. And this is where, Katie, a lot of your expertise is going to come in. So, I'm going to be passing things to you to really show us how we can do this. But now that we've introduced this idea, your events are a community building channel, we want to talk about the importance of maximizing community building opportunities. So, the how behind this. I love this slide here because we've really got some easy ways for you to ask yourself, are your events community centric? Really asking the hard questions if your events are truly promoting interactions or are you just checking the engagement box?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would actually challenge this slide a little bit because I think that the first bullet point should be the community involvement. For the demand community, every single thing that we do is because our members have asked for it. So every type of channel that we have in our community, every type of an event that we put on, every location for it is because it's exactly what our members are wanting. And so for me, that's what I would always put as a top number one thing. Who is asking for this? Who wants us there? One, you're really listening to your members and showing that you're able to take their recommendations and make it happen, which helps them build more trust and loyalty into you. But then you also have an already made RSVP list basically. So you know your event's going to be successful regardless because you already have people that are asking for this. So that to me, if you can do that, then you're already checking the box of if your event's community centric. Exclusivity, I think, is something that's really important for us to consider is are we actually able to really provide a good experience for everybody here who is our target audience, And not all events are created equal, right? So you will have some executive events that, yeah, of course you want that mid-level manager, that practitioner to be there, but that's not really geared towards them. So making sure that when you're planning these, like you are making it around the people that are going to be there and it's appropriate for whatever their level is. Same thing. Whenever you're looking at transparency, what's this going to look like for your community members? What is the requirement of them to be there as well? And are you talking with the members as you're planning this? So these are the types of things that I always consider whenever we make our community events happen, whether it be virtual, in person, or a hybrid of the two as well.
Fantastic. And I think this is another great opportunity for everyone that's here joining us today. I'd love to ask you, are your community members actively involved in helping you plan your events, or are they just passive attendees, right? I think that thinking about how you're taking this feedback, you're allowing that transparency, that you're taking this feedback into consideration and you're letting your community be more involved with your events is so important here. And sometimes it is the hard questions to ask yourself. Katie, I thought that was great what you brought up about exclusivity. So often, we as marketers are building events or even community events where we're thinking about what are we going to report back to our stakeholders? How are they going to feel about this event? What type of questions are we getting from them? And it really challenges you to ask yourself, who are you accommodating for? Does it happen to be, the loudest person in the room, or is it really the, diverse audience that you're trying to cater to? And I think that's, all ties back to being more authentic with your community as well. So knowing all of this, how can we tailor our strategies? And that's what we'll jump into next. Crafting a successful event requires a deep understanding of its purpose. And, we mentioned at the top of this session that business objectives will continue to drive our choices and our selections that we make when it comes to our events as a channel. Our focus on lead generation, thought leadership will continue to be at the forefront, but there's really this new balancing act that needs to happen between the business needs and your community needs. And I know this will probably create a bit of chatter because so many of us face this in our day-to-day lives at work all the time, that we really need to serve two goals: meeting business objectives and catering to community needs. So while your events might, aim to promote either products or services, their core purpose needs to remain, which is building and nurturing your community. And with the community at the forefront during the event design stage, during each stage after that, this is a way that you can ensure that your attendees and your community feels valued and integral to your business.
Yeah, and I would even take this a step further to say that if your community needs are not aligned with your business objectives, then you've got a bigger problem than you probably think. Because at the end of the day, they should never be running separate. They should never be two totally different motions that you have to balance. They should be so aligned that it makes sense. That if you think about it as, let's say you've got a customer community, everything that you're doing in that community should be providing value back to your business objectives. So if churn is something that is important or retention is important to your organization, your customer community should be providing product feedback, should be providing educational feedback, everything in between, right? And if you're doing meetups, in different type of in-person or virtual events that are geared towards customer enablement, then that should be aligning to your business objectives. Similarly, for the demand community, we're more of a community of practice. But for our business objectives for it, we get new business coming from it, we get referrals coming from it, and that's helping with our new business side of the company as well. So whenever you're planning events, if as long as you're making sure that your community is aligned with your business objectives, I would almost argue that your KPIs should be pretty easy from that side of things because you already know what your goals for the community are as well. But I also think it's tough to have that balance because, and once again, like community engagement is so incredibly difficult to track, but you have to take it a step further to say, It's not necessarily the engagement I care most about at the events. It's more, what are the quality of those engagements? What are the conversations being had? What, if there's different types of activities that they're doing, how does that lend itself to the business, right? And so I think that's something you have to really strongly consider whenever you're building this out.
Yeah, and I think that's a great transition there, that when you're building this out, this community focused approach, you really need a solid plan, right? And that's our next piece here that we want to cover is how to design a community centric event, what to think about when you're really starting off the process of a community focused approach for optimal success.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at everything that's on this slide, and I'll just start going left to right, I think event purpose, I love having that front and center right there, because every single event that you do has to have a purpose. Otherwise, when you're going to be struggling to get funding for it, if you're just like, well, it seems like a good idea. But instead, if you come to your management, or if you're making these decisions and say, these people in our community are asking for it, this is a great opportunity for us to do. I mean, customer education is a great example. This is a great opportunity for customer education and enablement. We want to add some certification training in there, all in person, whatever that looks like. I mean, there's so many great resources right in there to help really define what your purpose is for that. Same thing, and I'll stay with the customer education example for this as well. With audience insight, if you're asking, what do you want to learn more about? You're able to go into, oftentimes, into your platform, figure out where are our customers struggling, what aspects of our tool are they not using as much, and then able to build the content around that as well. And most importantly, how do we get people engaging? Because once again, you could put on an 8,000 person conference, but if you don't have a way for them to interact with each other, that's still your audience. That's still brand loyalty at that point. There's no community, there's no engaging with each other. And it can't just be, oh, go find someone with a name tag and say hi, right? It's, how do we make this intentional and thoughtful and really geared towards that community and relational building that, I mean, is really at the core of community. So I think that's incredibly important whenever you're building a community focused event.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Katie. I think that's a great way to, share the approach of how you can approach event design and really make sure that you're thinking about community during each stage of that. So let's think more about the role of community empowerment, right? We talked a lot about the planning process, that life cycle of your events. But when we think about enhancing engagement, we really need to think about this during the event, but also before the event and beyond your event, right? We touched a little bit on how now more than ever, you've got this ability to engage your community before events, during the events, and after the events. So before the start of your event, consider offering the ability for your attendees to schedule appointments ahead of time. Let them understand who's going to be attending, who they can meet with, the types of meetings that they can take, and allow them to start to engage in some direct messaging. They can do that with sponsors, with exhibitors, or even other attendees. You can also think about hosting birds of a feather type meetups. We do this a lot before our annual user conference. We engage our community where we've got numerous user groups and even create some new ones just for that event, like first time attendees, allowing others who have maybe never attended our user conference before to get to know those who are also attending for the first time, start to create those relationships, and then follow those relationships up once they get on site. And this is really where you can have some fun with this, because you can get really clever and think of, your conference profile in that digital tool as almost your avatar before you're on site, and really create some personality, whether that represents you and your personality or your organization that you're representing during that event. Okay. And then post event, it's important to acknowledge the notion of community that you just fostered during your event after the event. Expect that your attendees want to continue connecting with one another through direct messaging with their newly expanded network, whether that's through tools like LinkedIn or conference tools that you have provided to your attendees. Here at Cvent, we always think about platforms like Attendee Hub that allow for, even AI-driven recommendations based on your shared interests, your common sessions that you may have attended, to help connect your community after your event and really keep that engagement going. All right, having seen how one event's timeline can create deeper community engagement, Let's now delve into how events as a channel can be harnessed for community building.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that events producers could really take from community building and leveraging their community is really getting their content aligned with what members want. This is something for us as we were building the demand conference for this year. We had over 150 submissions from different speakers, and it's so tough trying to figure out what's the right thing, what's not the right thing, what type of content we should be putting out there, what matters most. And so luckily, we did have a group of advisors who were able to help on that. But in the next demand conference, we're actually going to be letting the public vote on it. And so I think that's a really cool resource that people can be leveraging is talk to your community, put it out there. What is it that you want to hear about? What do you want to learn about? Who do you want to learn from? Because what we're starting to see is while it's so valuable to have these great influencers and thought leaders coming because they do have a great brand following, a lot of folks are kind of over it. They want to hear from actual practitioners. And so giving the content back into the hand of the community to help build out what that process should look like and what the content should really look like for that conference or that event that you're planning. One, it guarantees a lot more registrants because you're actually getting people involved who want to be there and want to hear from these people. So making sure you have a process in place to gather their information to get them to register. But two, you're getting content from the people that you're asking to be a part of it, right? So it's more aligned to what they're hoping to learn about. It's more aligned to what matters most from them. I mean, how often do we come up with content internally thinking, oh, this is exactly what our audience wants or our community really needs this, and it's nowhere near the type of resources that they actually want, or they would actually use, or maybe the format that they actually want to see it in. And so really empowering your community members to get involved and giving them those resources and tools and different ways to share their opinion about the content will really take your event to the next step and get, like I said, get those registrants and get more engagement from it too.
Yeah, you really nailed that. On our side, we juggle this every year when it comes to sourcing content for our conferences or even for webinar programs like the one that we're running today. And I like to think we have a really good pulse on what you want to hear about. We will get those submissions coming in and realize that, hey, there's maybe some topics here that weren't on our radar, or we really need to increase the number of sessions that align to that one topic or
Mm.
track because we're feeling that demand from our community that we want to learn more about this. Or we've got folks that say, hey, I want to present on this. And we've seen that same shift that a lot of our sessions that were historically delivered from our own internal speakers, we're now bringing in more and more of our customers to tell that story from their point of view. And the real examples that they're able to provide to the rest of the community is just invaluable in terms of takeaways and the activity that you can take right back to your team. And it really delivers that instant gratification too when you attend an event and you're able to take that back to your team and have some quantifiable takeaways there. The next piece here that I wanted to touch on was quick win strategies. So we talked about listening to your community, the value that we've all seen in collecting content ideas and submissions from our community, but it goes beyond just those traditional breakout sessions. And even on my side, we've seen new session types emerge just based on submissions from our community, right? We've seen this trend of really like how to user driven sessions emerge. And that's created a new type of session for us. And I think that this year is just some quick win strategies on how you can bolster community growth and really start to get that participation from your community so that you can have those same listening takeaways that we've just shared here.
Yeah,
And these are some ideas that I had, but I'm curious to hear from the group if there's anything else you'd add to this list.
Some of the things that I even consider about whenever we're planning events, especially in-person activations, is what what almost takes you back to the classroom. And I know that sounds so silly, but if you think back to the times of being in elementary school or heck, even in college and some of our group projects and activities that we had to do, I think a lot of that actually can relate itself very well to some of these professional events as well. So I would almost recommend people to think about how do we get our audience? Because once again, you could be doing all these icebreakers. You can do networking sessions, all of this, but but you're not really thinking about the holistic audience at that point, right? Because you do have some introverts that aren't going to be comfortable with that. But what do we do in the session that gets every audience member interacting with each other? How do we crowdsource from that? And so I think back to, like I said, some of those school type activations that you could actually leverage in an event like this as well, is getting people at different tables and numbering off, and getting people to help be a part of the session, and not just in an attendee format, but so much more. I mean, have them be a part of the conversation, not just Q&As, not just sitting there and taking notes, but different ways to get them to really feel like they're a part of something. And I think that's really at the core of community, is getting these audience members to be a part of something. And that's going to be so memorable for them too. So whenever you're planning some of these, take it a step back, almost like I said, take it back to the elementary days of getting people in round tables and we're all working together and then we're shouting out different ideas. But if you're not able to do that in whatever format that you're planning, a lot of these strategies are so incredibly helpful whenever you can't do such in-depth, in-person type of activation. So leveraging great tools to get people involved with each other, having different types of strategic meetups post-event, in like Stacey said, pre-event as well. I mean, I think those are so incredibly valuable.
Those are some great points, Katie. And I really think that while we've highlighted some quick strategies here, it is so important to think about ways that you can drive long-term success. And I think that your approaches you just shared really hit that right on the head. So we covered a lot around feedback and how important this is. So it makes sense that we're going to double back here and we're going to double down on feedback, because the value of feedback really goes beyond just words, right? It's more than just the comments in a post-event survey. It really is a gold mine of insights to better enhance your events and support all of your community-driven initiatives. And when we think about feedback, we really do need to get a deeper understanding through this feedback of community needs and desires. Katie, do you have any thoughts on how you've done this, or how you think about feedback and as a way to deepen,
Yeah.
the understanding of those needs?
So I think one of the most important things to consider whenever we're looking at feedback is, how are we actually going to implement the feedback that we're asking for, right? Nothing is worse than spending all this time and doing all this effort into sending some feedback to a manager, or let's say an exit interview, or you left a doctor's office or a restaurant and you leave this feedback and you feel so excited about it because there could actually be change that comes from it, and then nothing happens. So I always tell folks, feedback's important, but you have to have a plan in order to actually use it. And if you don't, you're going to lose that loyalty that you worked so hard to build through the relationships, the community building that you've done. So, for feedback, one, look at it, figure out what people are saying. You don't always have to respond and say, hey, we're implementing this idea. This is so great, to every single idea, because not all of them are, not all of them fit your business needs. Not everyone knows what your business needs are, right? But instead, you can respond and say, hey, thank you for the feedback. We're actually reviewing everything. We'll keep you posted over the next few months as to what change is going to evolve from your feedback. Even something so simple like that helps to really increase that brand and relational loyalty with your community members, because they feel like they're being heard. Even if you can't, like I said, even if you can't implement it, you're doing something with it. You're at least showing that you're looking at the feedback. And also make sure that you're providing your members and your audience members and community members a chance to actually give feedback. Like I said, tell them what you're going to do with it, tell them that you're going to be reviewing it, provide updates on that feedback, but give them a welcome and open opportunity to actually give that feedback as well. And I think that makes a huge difference in your community loyalty programs, especially with events, because you want them to come back and they want to be able to say, oh, I put this in my feedback. They added more water bottles or whatever it is, right? And I think that makes a huge difference with your members.
Love that. There's actually a certain type of event that we hold here at Cvent, and we hold this once a year. So it's usually a year goes by before we get the same group of customers together and ask them, for feedback. And Katie, I think you just nailed it. That every time before we start that session during that annual event, we revisit all of the improvements that we've done over the past 12 months based on their feedback to remind them, this is what you said last year. Here's what we've done based on that feedback. And then we're here to do that again. I think it's important to remind your audience of what you've been able to do based on that feedback as well. All right. So when we think about elevating and engaging, we also need to think forward. We need to think to the future. And if the future is community, let's talk about how we are making that happen. How we're going to be able to shape our events with enhanced digital experiences, sustained engagement, and continue to push this concept of community throughout all that we do. A lot of the platforms that we are leveraging today help to bridge these divides, right? They're able to forge connections, integrate daily digital experiences like your phone that's in your pocket, your smartwatch on your wrist into your events. And this concept of a tech infused event really helps us also further the discussion that we had around engaging community before your events, during your events, and after your events. And as we think to all of the technology advancements that have happened this year, we know that next year is going to be no different. So we think about future innovation, how this technology and human connection is going to continue to intersect. There's huge potential here of what we can do with our community and the technology that we have at our fingertips. So Katie, I'd love to ask you this question. Based on your role, based on your expertise with community, how are you feeling about the future? And what do you think is next when we think about community?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I feel very strongly in, I'm very excited about the future of community and especially community driven events. We see so much in the sales side of the business as community led growth. And I think that's going to become more encapsulating of events and top of funnel exercises as well. I think we're going to be seeing a lot more events, but they're going to be very niche and they're going to be much smaller and really focused on the community side, not just the content. But it's also, I think, going to be more community driven content as well. And so for me, that's incredibly exciting for everything that I work through. But I think there's also going to be more emphasis on the technology side of it as well for how do we continue these conversations post conference too.
I feel like you're inside my brain as we're thinking about industry trends within the events industry for next year. That concept of smaller events, less events, but to have a deeper understanding of what that goal and objective is, right? Why you're bringing those people together and having smaller events that engage and create more of that community have been emerging as a top trend.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're on the forefront with that one.
Well, and I think something to think about too is if you start really evaluating the success of marketing teams this year, we've all heard the do more with less. I hate that. I hate that saying because we shouldn't have to, right? We shouldn't have to be working ourselves an extra 30 hours a week on top of everything because we've lost 4 people on the team. But unfortunately, it is what it is. And same thing with our budget. I think we've had to do a lot more with a lot less money too. And so these more like these smaller get togethers and these smaller networking events and super small conferences, I think micro conferences of sorts, I think are actually going to be more prevalent because they are working. And if you think about it, it's so much more affordable to go to, let's say, Austin, rent out a brewery for a day, have a bunch of local speakers come in and have people from DFW and Houston and Austin and San Antonio come in for it. It's a lot more affordable and they're not having to pay for speakers, travel or anything like that. It's affordable locations, affordable speakers, and it's really driven through community building. It's more about building the relationships through the conversations at these micro conferences than it is at larger conferences where it's hard to get to know people, right? So I think that's going to be a really big shift over the next year or two as well.
Yeah, you really paint the picture there for a brighter, more connected future of community. And as this new era of events continues to usher in, prioritizing community building, harnessing technology, sustaining engagement, I think those are really the top 3 takeaways from that. So as we get to the end of today's presentation, I want to make sure that we summarize as best as possible everything that we covered today. I know Katie was full of so many great tidbits of best practices and ways that you can continue to keep community at the forefront as you're looking at 2024, your events as a channel, and really increasing community engagement within your customer base. And I'm going to leave you with these three thoughts here: to embrace, to engage, and to evolve. To continue to embrace the power of the digital era, right? We talked about technology, we talked about the future, and we understand that leveraging technology is going to help us bridge gaps and bring people together. So embracing technology is key here. When it comes to engagement, amplifying your community ties from networking to some of those short-term strategies that we discussed, prioritizing those above and beyond what you're doing today is crucial to continue to engage with your community and create the community of your dreams. And then the third one here is evolve, right? Making sure that we are constantly reflecting, looking at that feedback that's coming from our communities, and really taking that feedback to heart to make improvements, stay at the forefront of those goals, those objectives, not only from your community, but from your business objectives as well. Katie, now I'm going to pass things to you for any final thoughts as we wrap up today's session.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like you mentioned, everything you said was totally spot on. I'd also add, once again, make sure that whatever you're doing, whatever you're planning, think about how are the attendees, how are the members really going to be, one, being engaged with, but then also how are you going to challenge and encourage them to engage with others? It's that second part that's really going to make a world of difference. Build that loyalty, build that community, increase your business, and really help you accomplish all the goals that you have. If at any point anyone has any questions, feel free to find me on LinkedIn. I'm always here for a conversation, or check out my newsletter as well.
Love that. Thanks so much, Katie. And to wrap up, I can't help but mention that Cvent is here for you to help you digitize any area of your event channel, from audience generation, attendee engagement, integrating with our critical systems that help us as marketers do everything that we're able to do, and to help you standardize your event tech stack under one system for better data management. As Katie mentioned, I'd also be happy to talk more about Cvent's products and services, starting with a discovery here of how you are leveraging your community within your events today, and how we can help you improve and iterate on that for the next. As mentioned during our discussion on community, your feedback is so important to us, and today's webinar is no different. We'd love to hear your feedback on what you thought about today's topic, today's speaker. So please start the survey and help us deliver better webinars to you. And if you're interested in joining any upcoming webinars, Cvent is hosting webinars on a number of topics over the next few weeks. We've got maximizing your budget for maximum ROI on the 14th. And then I do want to highlight on the 29th, we're also hosting a session on demystifying event ROI. What is the value of your event tech? If you're interested, we're also popping the link for these upcoming webinars in the chat, so make sure to register today.